Hi, this is Jose Palomino, once again your host for the Revenue Throughput Podcast. And our guest today is Emily Dalamangas, CEO of On the Map Marketing. And we're going to talk today about not chasing the bright new shiny object in your marketing plans that aren't really necessarily going to produce for you. So really how to set priorities, how to think about your planning, what's the foundation. Let's get started with Emily right now. Welcome, Emily, to the Revenue Throughput Podcast. So good
Thank
to
you
have
very
you.
much. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Emily, I love the name of your company, the On the Map Marketing, right? Just that conjures up so many positive images. So, just tell me a little bit about who you typically work with, just to give our listeners some context.
Thank you. So yes, you're right. My company is called On the Map Marketing, and I get a lot of questions thinking that I am related to some kind of travel marketing. And I do work with travel clients, but the name actually goes back to my love of travel. My belief that with marketing that you should get out, experience the world, and use those experiences to really inform my marketing projects. It also touches on the idea that marketing being put on the map and making something more well known. So, as far as my clients, I work with everybody from startups to more established businesses, along with some digital advertising agencies also. So my clients themselves range from everything in the tech sector, more in the SaaS B2B space, and also to more of lifestyle and that type of thing too. So I focus on marketing consulting and also do copywriting and content writing. So the thinking being that the writing really needs to have a strategy that underpins it.
Wow. So, when you deal with, let's say, an ideal client for you, is that going to typically be a very big company, mid-size, small, like Goldilocks? What? I'm just kind of curious who you think is. I can probably help these people.
I think you're right. Mid-size is definitely the sort of sweet spot for me. I find that more established companies already have sort of their marketing figured out. And a lot of more of the startups, while they definitely need the marketing help, they're way at the beginning in terms of figuring that out.
A little too, not enough there for you to work with, maybe.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yes.
And so when somebody says, "Gee, we need Emily, we need on the map marketing," are they what kind of, I guess, let's call them symptoms? What are some of the challenges they're facing that make them? They may not be thinking of you even by name yet. They just think we need help of some kind. What are some of the things that are problems they might be facing that would be an indicator that, hey, maybe you should be talking to somebody about this?
I see a lot of what I call chasing the bright, shiny object, which
Okay.
basically means that you're always looking for what is new and next and what is sort of cool and trendy out there. And I'm a big believer in you really need to build that strong marketing foundation before you can move on to chasing those bright, shiny objects. It's sort of that thinking that you need to build the house's foundation before you actually build the house itself. So
So
that's what
tell,
I
tell me
see
just
with
a
a lot
little
of.
bit, like, what would be a bright shiny object that you see somebody chase that you say, maybe not yet, or not, that shouldn't be as much emphasis as you're giving it.
I see this a lot in social media. So most companies have a social media presence, and there's always new things happening with the social media that is currently out there. And then there's all these new social media popping out. For example, Clubhouse, which is more of an audio type of platform. Within Twitter, they're always coming out with new products that are on there. But a lot of companies aren't really looking at what they're currently doing in social media rather than looking two steps ahead of what's the new bright thing out there. So Twitter's one area that I definitely see this a lot in. I have a lot of people that come to me and say, we want to be on Twitter, we want to be on LinkedIn, we want to be on Facebook. And my first question is, why do you want to be on there? What are you really looking to achieve from that? And Twitter in particular is one that I always hear about because I think people think they need to be on there and they need to have a presence. But that's not always the case. It's not the right fit for every business that's out there.
So it's what's interesting about that as well, and it's something I've observed with clients I've worked with over the years, and even our own efforts for our firm, is social media is often sold as an idea that it's free, so it's easy to do, and
Yes,
yet it's massively labor intensive.
yes, yes. There is a lot that goes into social media, and we're just talking about more organic social media and not even getting into paid social media. But there's a lot to do with the posts themselves, but also just all the monitoring and the engagement that goes along with that. And that's a key part of it too, is you need to keep that audience engaged with what you're doing on there.
And I guess maybe something I would love to hear you comment on is so one thing is chasing a nice shoe shiny, right? So they go after something and put a lot of effort into it. But I can't imagine you haven't run into situations where not only did they chase it, but they're doing it poorly.
Yes, definitely. Yes.
And what are some of the what are some of the consequences of them doing it poorly? I mean, versus not doing it at all.
I see a lot of not knowing what the right balance to strike with what you're doing with your posting, focusing too much on one area, whether it's sharing more news about yourself rather than engaging your audience, not offering enough posts that go around things that like education or inspiration, and really keeping your audience engaged that way. I see this a lot with companies. If you just scroll through different feeds, you'll see it happening where they're really not offering much in terms of value to the customer. And a lot of it is just talking about yourself. I also see a lot of not looking at doing the post customized to the platform that is on. I see a lot of the same post put up across, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all of those. When really you should be customizing that post to the audience themselves that are on that platform.
Well, first of all, that sounds like even more work. Okay.
Oh yeah. Yes.
So if somebody, let's say, my world tends to be, and I think many of our listeners tend to be in more industrial categories, right? So B2B, very B2B. So we don't normally think of Twitter being as relevant there, although it might be depending on the industry. LinkedIn seems to be kind of the universal in B2B, everybody's there and so on. But what have you seen, or maybe you've been involved with, in terms of what's possible? Like I always like to say, okay, if we're going to aim for something, I like to look, I don't want to see what Apple does with social or what Google, because those are companies that are so far beyond my reach to match whatever they do. But I'm assuming they have an entire team. Like who knows how big the team is of people just doing that.
Yeah.
What have you seen as possible in that mid-tier, middle market type company doing something successfully on social?
I think a lot of it is going back to what I was saying previously, is having a solid foundation for your social strategy, figuring that out first before you're going out to start posting things. So it's really just a matter of figuring out what you want to do with each of the platforms. And then really coming up with a content calendar, really mapping out what you want to be doing each week, each day with those different posts and what you hope to achieve with them. And really looking at what your metrics are as a result of that and seeing what's working and what's not working out there. And a lot of times, once you nail that, then you can really move on to all those bright, shiny objects we were talking about.
Right.
And once you have that solid social foundation out there. So it'll help you in terms of time saving and the amount of effort that you're putting into it. And also the amount of, time is money. So the amount of money that you're putting into your social media too.
So now let's say you're a company which is very typical in the middle market. You have limited
Yeah.
budget, limited time.
Yeah.
You may have a VP of marketing, but it's kind of like a pseudo VP of marketing,
Yeah.
not really particularly good at it or very strategic at it. What else can a company like that do to help do anything marketing wise to help grow its business? I mean, the truisms, well, we need a good website or we need a new trade show booth or whatever. What have you found is kind of like and I know this actual mileage can vary company by company, but just a general sense, like what are some of the things you should be looking at if you want to get your marketing in gear?
Yes. I would look at where you're meeting your customers the most, whether they're coming to your website, your social media, or even just maybe seeing a print ad in like your local magazine. Figure out where you are getting the most results from and in the most engagement, and put your efforts there. If you are a marketing department of one, then put your efforts into that. Going back to social media, you don't need to be on 4 or 5 different social media platforms. Look at the one that is doing the most for you in terms of the most engagement, and put your effort and time into that one and really focus on that one first. Get that one down before you move on to the other ones.
So there's probably a lot of pressure if you read anything in like the trade press, like anything from Forbes to Entrepreneur Magazine. You're an owner of, let's say, a $10 million manufacturer, and it seems like, boy, you better be doing all of these things. Yeah. And you better create funnels, and you better have a content flow for this and a content flow for that. And it can just kind of make your head explode if you're not a marketing agency, right? So how would you advise somebody like that to triage? I know, to find out, you said something very good, I think extremely powerful. Where are you meeting your customers now? So is it okay if I'm an owner of a business to just do 1 or 2 things and focus on that? Or don't I have to be like the cool kids and do all 17 activities?
You don't need to be like the cool kids. You don't have to sit at the cool kid table for this. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but go back to that foundation. Really get that strategy down. Figure out, who your target is, what's going to work to connect with them, what's going to give you the best results as part of it. And anybody from large companies to smaller ones should really have that down in terms of that strong foundation that's part of it. One thing I highly suggest is doing a brand audit. And that's something that you don't need to have, an agency or a marketer to work with you on. Anybody can do that. And I think that's one of the most important things, is to look at what you are doing out there currently. Look at your website, look at your social media, look at all those different marketing things that you have out there, and do your own self-audit on it and look at what's working and what's not working.
And are they even telling the same story?
Exactly. And chances are they're not.
Sure.
And one of the biggest things I see is outdated information, whether it's on social or your website. You go to their Twitter feed and they haven't posted in 6 months. So it's, hard to sort of have a belief in a company that's not putting the effort into those, areas as part of things. I like to think of it as, there's always that one house on the block that still has the Christmas lights up in March. It's like, let's look at the times here. You don't want to be that outdated person that's out there with your brand. And that's one of the easiest things you can catch with a brand audit.
Right. It's funny because I've run into certainly clients that they're proud of, they have a blog, and I look at it and the last post was 5 years ago. And I said, look, I'd rather you take down the blog. Just don't say you have a blog, because doing anything halfway, in fact, I think the market tends to penalize you more rigorously if you do it poorly than if you don't do it at all.
Exactly. Yes, I completely agree.
Wow. So let me ask you this question here, Emily. As you think back to your client work, and you don't have to name names, but maybe just give us a little bit of an example of a company that you came in maybe, and it was a bit of to be generous, a hot mess. And maybe a year later, something, like you were able to work through it. Give us an example of what's possible, because I think sometimes people don't start something because they think that's too big a job. I can never climb Mount Everest. And it turns out it's not Mount Everest. It's like, it's a 1,000-yard hill. You can make it, so. Yes. Is there an example you could think of? Again, I'm not asking you to reveal confidences, but just to help us visualize what's possible.
Yeah, I think one of the best examples, and actually one of the funnest projects I've worked on, was with a forensic anthropology business. So that is the examination of skeletal remains. And it was a one-woman business that was a forensic anthropologist. And her clients were mostly in law enforcement, local governments, that type of thing.
We hope that's her client base.
Yeah, exactly. And she had just a really bad looking website. She had, thrown it together, just the one page, there was some text and a few random pictures on there. And what it didn't do is it didn't give her any of that credibility or any of that authority in the space, so that when people were looking out for her help, they were seeing somebody that wasn't best represented online. And she didn't need anything else beyond just a better looking website. She didn't need the social media. She didn't need all those other things. She just needed a better site. So we worked together on putting together a better website that really showed more of her credentials. It showed her press clippings, so that gave her more authority out there. It showed her work as a professor and gave her more credibility that way too. So it can be as simple as just putting together a really good, solid website to really grow your business and to give you that authority and the credibility in whatever your space is.
So it's interesting. One of the kind of the corollary to that, or the inverse of that, is if you have the wrong presence or poorly done presence, it actually pauses people and say, well, this is clearly not what I'm looking for. When in fact, in the example you gave, she was what you were looking for. But you kind of like, I'm not sure I want to go there because this doesn't look like they're ready for prime time.
Exactly.
So sometimes just a cleanup. It's like your in-laws are coming. Like, just okay, let's get the house together.
Exactly.
We don't need a new house. We just need to get the house together. So
exactly, and one with a good, strong foundation.
That's right. No, that's great. And so you hit on this theme of foundation a lot, and I love that thought that there's some basics. So if you were to identify, let's say, three things every business should make sure they have in terms of like either core assets or maybe better said, clarity on, three things they should be clear about, what would those things be to help them build an effective marketing platform?
I would go back to paid, owned, and earned media, which are probably terms that you're quite familiar with. And basically, it's three areas of marketing. Your paid media are things like your Facebook ads that you're running, that you're actually paying money for. Your earned media is something like PR. Maybe your local paper is running an article about your business. And then your owned media is things like your website and your social media. And really look at them in terms of those three buckets and where you, again, putting your money and your efforts into to get the most results. So again, going back to that brand audit, look at those three areas and really take a close look at if you're doing enough and where the areas are that you could really improve in.
That's great, Emily. And just one sub part of that I like to focus in on, just because I've observed this.
Yeah.
And that is owners that get stuck on the wheel with paid, and they're running ad campaigns with an agency for, it appears, years. And when you ask them a simple question, can you point to a single piece of business that's actually generated for you? And they're fearful to turn it off because the next day may be the day that lead comes through. I mean, so it seems like they're not applying the same rigor of an ROI to that as they might have done other things, because it's mysterious to them. It's like, I'm supposed to do it.
Exactly.
So how would you advise that owner to, like, it's okay to pull back from it, slow it down, stop it for a while? I mean,
yeah, I would advise trying to, don't walk away from it just yet, but test some other areas. Maybe you're running ads on Facebook, so try testing some ads on another social media platform and seeing if that's going to give you better results. The other thing is to do simple, A/B tests, which basically means running ads with different copy or different imagery, and seeing if one of those is going to resonate a little bit better than not. So you're not pulling your whole campaign, you're just trying to test some different things out there to see what may be more effective and give you better metrics and results as a part of that.
okay. Well, Emily, this has been great. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your experience here. I love the idea of not chasing the new shiny, and it seems to be such a theme in just this short conversation we've had around that. It's okay to slow it down, to take a look, to really be sure that you're moving with sure-footedness moving forward in your marketing plan. If somebody wanted to know more about what you do and how you might help them, how can they best learn about you and maybe even contact you?
The best thing would be to go to my website, which is onthemappmktg.com.
Okay, on the map, mktg.com, and we'll
Yes.
have that in our show notes as well when we publish
Wonderful.
this podcast. Emily, once more, just thank you for being part of this and really enriching, I think, our audience's understanding of how they can approach marketing.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome.